In my past life, a sudden flood broke out, and I followed the production team to the front lines for rescue efforts. When I returned, I was told that my husband had been swept away by the flood and had already passed away. Upon hearing the news, I fainted on the spot. By the time I woke up, my husband had already been buried in the earth. I stayed by his grave, refusing to eat or drink, only to be approached by members of the brigade. That was when I learned that my husband had secretly embezzled the villagers' crowdfunding money to repay the debt. I took on multiple part-time jobs. Years later, my hands and feet were numb from the cold as I carried buckets of manure to fertilize the fields. But then, I saw my supposedly dead husband driving a luxury car, returning to the village with his mistress and their family. I rushed over to confront him, but he only said, "I never liked you. But considering that you took care of my whole family, I allowed you to hold on to the title of my wife for over 10 years. You should be grateful." My old illness relapsed, and I died of pure rage. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my husband faked his death. Chapter 1. It's all because I didn't stop him. If I hadn't let Luis go to save those people, maybe he wouldn't have left us. My mother-in-law's voice echoed in my ears. She clutched my hands, sobbing, "How will you go on from now? My son had a cruel fate. You had only just married into our family, and now you've become a widow. It's our family's fault. If you want to hit me or curse me, I won't stop you." I lowered my gaze, and in the small puddle on the ground, I saw my reflection, a younger version of myself. My once bright, jet black hair, my hands free from the calluses I had accumulated over the years. It was only then that I finally realized I had truly been reborn. In my past life, when I heard the news that Luis had been swept away by the flood, I rushed home overnight from the neighboring village, trekking over 10 kilometers of mountain roads. Yet I was still too late. I couldn't bear the news of Luis's death. I cried so hard that I fainted. By the time I woke up, my mother-in-law had already buried him in the earth. I knelt before my husband's grave, fasting for an entire day and night. But the ones who came for me weren't mourners, they were the brigade members demanding repayment. Only then did I learn that before his death, Luis had embezzled the village's crowd-funded road repair funds. I rushed to the bank to check Luis's savings account, but the money had already been transferred away by my mother-in-law. And when I returned home, even the house had been taken over by my husband's elder brother and his family. As if that wasn't enough, my mother-in-law blamed me for her son's death. She went to the village committee to accuse me, causing me to lose my job at the village broadcasting station. With no way out, I confronted her. That was when I discovered that my broadcasting job had already been given to my sister-in-law's younger brother. Not only had my mother-in-law taken the compensation for my job position, but she had also pocketed Luis's funeral subsidy. I demanded answers, only to be met with her mocking laughter. "If I hadn't pretended to be nice to you back then, would you have so willingly handed over your job? Who knew you'd be this stupid?" Furious, I went to the village committee to seek justice. But before I could even get there, my husband's elder brother dragged me into an alley and beat me so badly I was left with serious injuries. With no job left, I had no choice but to take on odd jobs to pay off the debts. Years later, with my hands and feet numb from the cold, I carried buckets of manure to fertilize the crops in the fields. But then, I saw Luis, whom I had believed to be long dead, driving a car, returning to the village with a strange woman. It was only then that I realized I had been played by his entire family. Luis had embezzled the village's road repair funds and eloped with his mistress. Not only that, but he had become the first wealthy man in the village, earning tens of thousands. Meanwhile, I had been crushed under the weight of his family's oppression for over a decade, my body worn thin from relentless labor, struggling just to pay off the debts he had left behind. Furious, I ran up to him, demanding to know why he had done this to me. Luis looked at me with disdain and said, "I never loved you, but since you took care of my entire family, I allowed you to hold on to my wife's title for over 10 years. You should be grateful." The mistress smirked and tossed me a 10 yuan bill, saying it was a token of gratitude from Luis for all my years of hard work. Overwhelmed with rage, I collapsed and died on the spot. Luis and his mistress simply drove away, leaving me behind in the dust. Chapter 2. Thinking about everything that had happened in my past life, I made a decision. Since this family wanted to put on an act in front of me, helping Luis fake his death, then I would make sure his fake death became real. Hearing my words, the villagers around me grew teary-eyed. My eldest brother-in-law stepped forward to comfort me. Don't worry. Even if Luis is gone, Laura is still our sister-in-law. As long as we're here, let's see who in this village dares to mistreat her. Just as he finished speaking, my sister-in-law immediately started playing the victim. It's just a pity that your big brother is quite useless. He has no real savings to speak of. If you could transfer the house your father left you to us, it would really help our family out. In the future, whenever you need anything, your brother and I will be there to support you. Don't you think? She pulled out some pre-prepared documents and handed them to me. You know how strict the regulations have become lately. The village has already sent multiple notices. If you don't transfer it soon, the house will be confiscated. What a waste that would be. If you transfer it to your big brother, he has connections in the village committee. He can pull some strings and help save you a few thousand yuan in the process. Sure enough, it only took a few words before their true motives were revealed. In my past life, I was too naive to tell which of their words were lies and which were true. I genuinely believed my brother-in-law's family cared for me, so I softened and transferred the house to them. But after Luis's death, they turned their backs on me instantly. Not only did they kick me out of the house, but they also took over the property and farmland my father had left me. When I tried to confront them, my brother-in-law called people to beat me so badly I was hospitalized. This time, there was no way I was going to fall for their schemes again. Without hesitation, I firmly rejected them, but this house was left to me by my father. My eldest brother-in-law was the first to react, pretending to act in my best interest. Your sister-in-law and I are only thinking of what's best for you. Handling this kind of paperwork as a woman is a huge hassle. You'll need to go through 5 different offices, and the regulations are extremely strict. You probably won't even be able to get it done. Besides, we're all family. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. If you agree, when you grow old, your nephew will even take care of you in your later years. Seeing his shameless expression only deepened my disgust. I immediately responded, but that house was left to me by my father. Why should I give it to you? My sister-in-law looked visibly embarrassed, clearly not expecting me to refuse so directly. Sensing the tension, my mother-in-law stepped in to smooth things over. All right. We're all family. I know Laura isn't an ungrateful person. She must just be too heartbroken right now. She grabbed my hands and began to cry, wailing pitifully. It's all my fault for being a useless mother. Laura, for my sake, please don't hold a grudge against your brother-in-law, all right? He's just worried about you. You're still young, and there are things you don't fully understand yet. My brother-in-law nodded along. Exactly. We really don't mean anything bad by this. I turned to face my mother-in-law. I want to settle Luis's funeral arrangements first. We can talk about this later, all right? Hearing this, my mother-in-law's eyes filled with tears. What a good girl. My son really didn't misjudge you. I'll call the crematorium right away. Since it's still early, we should take care of Luis's funeral now. I nodded, lowering my head as I wiped away my tears. But the corners of my lips curled into a smirk. How convenient. It seemed my mother-in-law had already arranged everything for Luis's fake death. The crematorium workers arrived quickly. My sister-in-law stepped in front of me, blocking my way, and handed me a glass of water. Sister-in-law, you shouldn't look. I'm afraid you won't be able to handle it. Chapter 3. Suddenly, I remembered, last time, I had fainted right after drinking the water my sister-in-law handed me. That was how they made sure I missed Luis's burial. There was no way I would let them succeed again in this life. I held the cup of water and, without a hint of suspicion, walked over to my mother-in-law. With a caring smile, I handed it to her. Mom, you've worked so hard. Having you by my side these past few days has really helped me feel at ease. Eager to maintain her act of kindness in front of me, my mother-in-law didn't hesitate. Without thinking, she took the cup and drank it, completely missing the panic flashing across my sister-in-law's face. By the time my sister-in-law tried to stop her, it was too late. Less than a minute after drinking, my mother-in-law collapsed to the ground. My sister-in-law, now furious, snapped at me. That cup was meant for you. Why did you give it to Mom? I looked at her innocently. Why shouldn't she drink it? It's just a glass of water, isn't it? Her face turned ashen with anger, but she had nothing to say in response. I turned to my eldest brother-in-law, feigning concern as I handed my unconscious mother-in-law over to him. Mom suddenly passed out. You should hurry and take her to the hospital. I'll handle Luis's funeral arrangements. But my brother-in-law refused immediately. That won't do. You should take Mom to the hospital instead. Leave Luis's funeral to me and your sister-in-law. I wasn't going to back down. I am Luis's wife. It is my duty to handle his funeral. Mom's health is important. This is settled. After speaking, I immediately signaled for the crematorium workers to load my husband's body onto the vehicle. Seeing that I was about to leave, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law panicked completely and scrambled for excuses. Maybe we should wait until Mom wakes up before going. There's still plenty of time. Anyway, yes, exactly. We should at least wait for Mom to wake up first. I brushed off my brother-in-law's hand and said firmly, "What do you mean there's still time? Isn't handling the funeral properly the most important thing? Luis gave everything to your family when he was alive, and now you won't even let him have a proper farewell? Do you even have a conscience?" My cries drew the attention of the crematorium workers. Many bystanders started speaking up on my behalf. Brother, respect for the dead is important. It's best to take care of the arrangements as soon as possible. Exactly. If you do right by the deceased, it will bring blessings to your family. How can you say this isn't urgent? Since it's still early, let's proceed with the cremation now. That way, we can give the deceased some peace. I squeezed out a few tears and discreetly handed a red envelope to each of the crematorium workers. I'll be counting on you all. Thank you for your hard work. The workers, now motivated by my gesture of appreciation, moved with remarkable speed. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law, now in full panic mode, ran in circles, desperately trying to wake my unconscious mother-in-law. But no matter how hard he shook her, she remained deeply asleep, showing no signs of waking up. As the crematorium workers started to urge us to proceed, my brother-in-law finally lost it and threw himself in front of me. Sister-in-law, just now, I think I saw Luis's fingers move. Maybe there's still a chance to save him. Without hesitation, I pulled out the official death certificate. Brother, I know you're upset about Luis's death, but you can't just say things like that. This death certificate, wasn't it you and my sister-in-law who went to get it? Are you saying it's fake? Falsifying a death certificate is illegal. That would be considered premeditated murder. You do know that's a crime, right? My words left my brother-in-law completely speechless, his face turning pale with fear. My sister-in-law, unwilling to give up, suddenly lunged at me in a frenzy. But I was quicker. Without hesitation, I dove straight into the crematorium vehicle. Bang! I slammed the door shut behind me. Chapter 4. My sister-in-law banged on the window, shouting, "Sister-in-law, wait for me. I'll go with you." I remained calm and told the driver, "Drive." The car sped off, leaving my sister-in-law behind. I glanced through the rear window and saw my brother-in-law scrambling to his feet, panicking as he ran off to find help. Pulling my gaze back inside the car, I looked at Luis lying on the stretcher. Finally, I couldn't help but laugh. In my past life, when I saw him at the village entrance, there wasn't a single trace of age on his face. He looked just as young as he did now, wearing an expensive down jacket and carrying 2 bottles of Moutai liquor in his hands. Meanwhile, I had been scavenging for trash at the village entrance. I rushed forward, grabbing his wrist, desperate to question him, but he kicked me away without hesitation. With an expression of utter disgust, he patted the dust off his coat. "Where did this beggar come from? Do you even know how expensive this jacket is? How dare you touch me?" My throat was hoarse as I pushed my tangled, dirty hair away from my face. I was filled with grievances, with resentment, with despair. And yet, it took him a long moment to recognize me. When he finally did, he laughed. "Oh, it's you. It's only been a few years, and you already look older than my grandmother. If you go out looking like that, don't tell people you know me. I don't want to be embarrassed." Back then, after years of endless labor, my skin had peeled from sun damage. My face full of deep wrinkles, I truly looked decades older. Tears streamed down my face as I demanded, "Weren't you supposed to be dead? Have you been lying to me this whole time?" Luis pulled the unfamiliar woman and child behind him closer. With a smile, he said, "Of course, I faked my death to get rid of you. Since you took care of my entire family, I let you hold on to the title of my wife for over 10 years. You should be grateful." It was at that moment that I finally understood everything. Luis could have simply divorced me and run away with his mistress. But instead, he chose to fake his death. That way, not only could he escape with the stolen road repair funds and enjoy a carefree life, but his family could also devour everything I had left behind. Or perhaps, from the very beginning, this entire family had been scheming against me. They knew my father had only one daughter, me. So, they set their sights on my family's house and land. By using Luis's death as an excuse, they were able to seize everything that belonged to me. I trembled with rage, but Luis continued speaking. "Actually, when I faked my death, I was fully conscious, I just couldn't move. But damn, your crying was so awful. I still can't forget how much you sounded like a squealing pig." His mistress clung to his arm, grinning as she pulled out a 10 yuan bill and tossed it at me. "We should really thank you for taking care of Luis all these years. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have had such an easy time getting together." I tore the money to shreds and threw it in her face. Luis, unfazed, lifted his foot and kicked me straight into the gutter. Then, without even looking back, he drove away with his mistress and their family, leaving me for dead. The last thing I saw before I took my final breath was Luis driving off. My vision blurred as darkness consumed me. Chapter 5. I was lost in my memories when I suddenly snapped back to reality. Luis's fingers twitched slightly at his side. It seemed the effects of the anesthetic were wearing off. He was about to wake up. I quickly urged the driver, "Sir, please drive faster. I want to settle my husband's funeral as soon as possible. My mother-in-law is in poor health. She can't accept the pain of sending her child off. She keeps insisting that my husband is still alive and even threatened to stop the cremation." Hearing this, the driver pressed the accelerator to the floor. I knew Luis could hear everything I was saying. Lowering my head, I leaned in close to his ear and whispered all the words I never got to say in my past life. "I know you're not dead. I also know you've had another woman for a long time. You and your mother planned this entire act just to make me pay off your debts, so you could run away with that whore and live happily ever after. So I've decided to help you out. Since you're so desperate to die, I'll grant your wish. I know you can hear me right now, and I'm not afraid of you knowing the truth, because you'll be dead soon anyway. Do you know why I'm doing this, Luis? Because I crawled back from hell. I was reborn for one reason only, to make you all pay. Don't worry. No one is coming to save you. Have you ever experienced a fate worse than death? Even if you haven't, it doesn't matter, because you're about to." Perhaps it was my words that finally broke him. Tears rolled down Luis's face. Like a dying fish struggling in vain, satisfaction surged through me. "Don't cry just yet," I mocked. "Save your tears for when you're inside the cremation chamber." The crematorium was just past the mountain ahead, but when we arrived, I was met with an unexpected issue. There was a queue. The administrator told me to wait. Wait? That was impossible. Without hesitation, I grabbed his hand, my voice filled with desperation and sorrow. "Brother, please, can you let me skip the line? I need to cremate my husband quickly so I can go back and take care of my mother-in-law. You know how hard it is for an old woman to bury her child." She fainted and had to be taken to the hospital. "Now that my husband is gone, I'm the only daughter-in-law she has left. She needs me by her side." My words made perfect sense. Emotionally and logically, the two families ahead of me, waiting for their cremations, exchanged glances and eventually sighed. "Why don't we let her go first? We're not in a hurry. There's still plenty of time today." Hearing the other family's approval, the crematorium administrator nodded. "All right then, push the body into the cremation chamber." I wiped away my tears, took a deep breath, and gathered all my strength to shove my dear husband inside. Just as I was about to urge them to start the process, a loud rumbling noise echoed from outside. A tractor. I turned around and saw my brother-in-law's family rushing toward us, bringing my mother-in-law along. "Stop! Stop! Don't burn him!" My mother-in-law, still weak from the drug, staggered forward, her body swaying unsteadily. She tried to run, but her legs gave out beneath her, and she fell multiple times on her way over. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law followed closely behind, desperately trying to stop me. Sister-in-law, how could you bring Luis's body here without telling us? Do you know how worried Mom was? Meanwhile, my mother-in-law dropped to her knees, slamming her hands against the ground as she wailed. My poor son. He was taken from us so young. How am I supposed to go on? Push my son out of there right now. I need to see him one last time. Even now. She was still acting, still putting on a show. I grabbed my mother-in-law's hand and sighed as if overcome with grief. Mom, I know you can't accept Luis's death. If you can't bring yourself to do it, then let me be the bad guy. At least this way, you won't have to spend the rest of your days crying over him. As I spoke, I reached for the lever to pull it down. My sister-in-law lunged at me, trying to shove me aside, but I was faster. I stuck my foot out and tripped her. With her massive body, she stumbled forward uncontrollably and slammed directly into the lever. The door locked shut, sealing Luis inside. The flames roared to life, instantly swallowing his body whole. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the crematorium. Ah! Behind me, the screams of my sister-in-law and mother-in-law echoed through the crematorium, but no one paid them any attention. I kept my eyes fixed on the cremation chamber, watching Luis inside. By my estimation, the anesthetic should have completely worn off by now. Sure enough, inside the roaring flames, Luis struggled, his hand weakly lifting. My mother-in-law let out a piercing wail and tried to rush forward. That's my son. My son isn't dead. Do you see that? He's alive. My son isn't dead. My son isn't dead. The crematorium manager stepped in to block her, speaking calmly. Ma'am, this is completely normal. After death, bodies sometimes exhibit muscle reflexes. Some lift their arms, others their legs. It's just post-mortem movement. Nothing to be afraid of. Behind us, some staff whispered amongst themselves. But that movement is too lifelike. I've never seen a reaction this intense before. I feigned grief, staring at the cremation chamber with teary eyes. My husband was always so filial in life. He must have heard his mother's voice and couldn't bear to leave. Luis, go in peace. I'll take care of our family from now on, and I'll make sure they join you soon. My brother-in-law was the first to react. Panicking, he rushed forward, trying to pry open the cremation chamber. Open it! This is murder. The staff, however, remained indifferent. Sir, I understand that this is difficult for you to accept, but this is a crematorium, not a place for outbursts. Besides, this is an imported cremation chamber. Once the process starts, it must complete before it can be reopened. Life and death are beyond our control. Please accept my condolences. My brother-in-law's face turned ghostly pale. He collapsed onto the floor, muttering in a daze. It's over, we're finished. Sensing the looming danger, my sister-in-law immediately tried to shift the blame onto me. Didn't we tell you to wait for us before starting the cremation? If you had just waited, this wouldn't have happened. I widened my eyes and feigned innocence. I only wanted to spare Mom the pain of seeing Luis like this. That's why I thought it would be better to cremate him as soon as possible. Besides, he was going to be cremated sooner or later anyway. Was I wrong for wanting him to rest in peace sooner? Hearing this, my mother-in-law broke down into an even louder sob. You killed Luis. You wretched jinx. You need to die with him. I gasped in shock, looking utterly heartbroken. Mom, I know it's hard for you to accept Luis's death, but how can you blame me? He drowned in the flood. The death certificate was handled by brother and sister-in-law, wasn't it? What does any of this have to do with me? If you don't believe me, ask brother. He was the one who brought back Luis's body. He was the one who gave me the death certificate. Isn't that right, brother? I turned to face my brother-in-law's family, but he had no words to refute me. What could he say? Admit that the death certificate was fake? That Luis was never actually dead? Who would believe that now? Realizing this, my mother-in-law's rage shifted. She turned and struck my brother-in-law with all her strength. You unfilial son, it's all your fault. Luis was alive and well, yet you had to go and issue a death certificate. If it weren't for you, Luis wouldn't have died. This is all because of you. Feigning shock, I let out a gasp. Mom, what do you mean? Didn't you tell me yourself that Luis was dead? Were you lying to me this whole time? Chapter 6. My brother-in-law's face twisted in hesitation. But my sister-in-law, impulsive as ever, blurted out the truth. Luis wasn't dead. He was just given anesthesia. If you had waited a little longer before cremating him, he would have woken up. The moment the words left her mouth, my brother-in-law turned and slapped her across the face. What the hell are you saying? But my sister-in-law, desperate to shift the blame off herself, spilled everything in a panic. Why are you blaming me? Everything was planned perfectly. It's her fault. She must have known. She even gave my water to Mom. She definitely figured everything out beforehand. It's her. She's the one who killed Luis. I knew she would try to pin the blame on me. So, I played dumb to the very end. Sister-in-law, what are you saying? You just admitted Luis was under anesthesia. Why was he drugged? Why was there a fake death certificate? Even if you want to accuse me, at least come up with a better excuse than that. The crematorium staff chimed in as well. Forging a death certificate is a serious crime. This is not something to joke about. Not satisfied with just watching them fall apart, I fanned the flames further. Besides, weren't you the one who pulled the lever just now? How can you blame me? At my words, my mother-in-law spun toward my sister-in-law, her eyes widening in shock. And then, she collapsed, unconscious. Right at that moment, the cremation process finished. I wasted no time, walking over to collect Luis's ashes. Then, turning back with an angry scowl, I pointed at them in feigned frustration. Look, you've made Mom faint from anger. This has nothing to do with me. You better take her to the hospital yourselves. After saying my piece, I followed the crematorium staff to retrieve Luis's urn. Then, without looking back, I swiftly left the crematorium. I had no time to waste dealing with that wretched family, because I still had unfinished business. With my mother-in-law still unconscious, I had to move fast. In my past life, after Luis's supposed death, I had been so devastated that I spent days in a stupor, neither eating nor drinking. By the time I came to my senses, the village officials had already come knocking. This time, I wouldn't let that happen. I would act before they did. I rushed to the town's bank as fast as I could. But when I checked Luis's account, the balance showed 0. So, he had already withdrawn the money. If it wasn't in the bank, then it had to be somewhere else. Then, I recalled something. Just a few days ago, I had caught Luis sneaking around the house with a guilty look on his face. Could it be that he had hidden the money at home? Chapter 7. I didn't have a second to waste. I spent a fortune hiring a tractor to take me back home as fast as possible. And sure enough, after searching the cattle shed, I found the stash. Thousands of yuan, carefully hidden away. Luis had planned this long ago. Not only was this the stolen village road repair fund, but also years' worth of his saved wages. I took everything without hesitation. Then, I went door to door, repaying every villager their share of the stolen road money. The villagers, knowing that I had just lost my husband, expressed their sympathy and kindness. But I wasn't done. Instead of going home, I immediately contacted the village secretary. I told him I wanted to sell the house my father had left me, and that I was willing to lower the price to speed up the process. With such an enticing offer, the house was sold almost instantly. The money was transferred to me, and out of courtesy, I handed the village secretary a red envelope as a token of appreciation. With everything settled, I finally had a moment to breathe, and that's when it hit me. I still had Luis's ashes. Feeling great, I picked up the urn and tossed the ashes, all of them, right into the river. Since you wanted to leave so badly, dear husband, I'll grant your wish. Now, you're truly free. Oh, and thanks for the money you left me. I'll be living a fantastic life thanks to you. Don't miss me too much on the other side. All right? Grinning, I scattered the last bit of ashes. Then, for good measure, I scooped up 2 handfuls of dirt and dumped them into the urn. Satisfied, I headed home in high spirits. The next morning, my mother-in-law stormed into my house with my brother-in-law and his wife in tow. Trailing behind them were several village leaders. The grieving old woman didn't even bother pretending anymore. Her mask had completely fallen off. She pointed at me, her face twisted with fury. Secretary! It was her! She murdered my son. If it weren't for her, he'd still be alive. She's a murderer. Arrest her immediately. I blinked innocently. Mother-in-law, what are you saying? It was sister-in-law who pulled the lever at the crematorium. What does any of this have to do with me? Turning to the village secretary, I put on my best sorrowful expression. Secretary, you have to stand up for me. Luis's death pains me too, but mother-in-law keeps accusing me of killing him. How could I ever harm my own husband? My sister-in-law lost it. Bullshit! She screamed, jabbing a finger at me. Before she could lunge at me, my brother-in-law strode in, dragging a woman behind him. I recognized her instantly. Elise, the same woman Luis had run off with in my past life. She was pregnant, and crying like her world had just collapsed. Sister, Elise sobbed, clutching her stomach. Luis never meant to deceive you. He only faked his death because I was pregnant. He just wanted to be with me and our child. That's why he took the anesthesia. He never wanted to hurt you. He only wanted to give us a home. But you burned him alive. My sister-in-law grabbed Elise's hand and wailed dramatically alongside her. What's the point of saying all this now? Luis is dead. Elise, you're just a woman. How are you going to raise a child alone? My brother-in-law, always eager to stir the pot, spoke up again. If you ask me, we should just put your house under our name. That way, Elise and the baby will have a place to live in the future. My mother-in-law chimed in, her tone forceful, trying to brainwash me. You and Luis were married for 3 years and never had a child. But since you're part of this family, it's only right that you take responsibility and raise Luis's child in his place. It was the most absurd thing I had ever heard. Truly, this family had lost their minds. You claim this child is Luis's. But where's the proof? I sneered. Or did you just grab some random pregnant woman off the streets to scam me out of my family's property? Let's be real here. You're just after the house my father left me. You want to wipe me out completely, don't you? My sister-in-law was the first to panic. You and Luis were married. There's no such thing as yours and mine between husband and wife. What's yours belongs to Luis. And what belongs to Luis is ours. In my past life, I had been too naive to understand the implications of their words. I had been fooled by them, intimidated into giving in. But in this life, I knew better. This house belonged to me before I married Luis. Do you not understand how property law works? It's considered personal property acquired before marriage. Why should I give it to you? The moment I said that, they were left speechless, except for my mother-in-law, who still refused to back down. Even if that's true, you still killed my son. Giving us a house as compensation isn't too much to ask. This is murder. You should be in prison for this. If you don't agree, I'll get a lawyer and sue you. I wasn't in the mood to argue with them, but since the village secretary was present, I decided to make my stance clear. I pulled out the death certificate. Secretary, please be the judge here. Luis's body was brought back by them. Even the death certificate was issued by them. All I did was follow standard procedure and take him to be cremated, so how is this my fault? When the crematorium staff came to pick up the body, my sister-in-law watched as I placed Luis inside the car. Why didn't she say anything then? And when my mother-in-law and brother-in-law arrived at the crematorium, not one of them told me Luis was still alive. If you want to confirm the truth, the village secretary and captain can go ask the crematorium staff. They were all witnesses. To get to the bottom of things, the village secretary and captain personally went to the crematorium. And the result? Everything I said was true. Not only did my mother-in-law's family fail in their attempt to steal my property, they were scolded in front of everyone. And just like that, the matter was settled. Chapter 8. But I knew this was far from over. Sure enough, that very night, my brother-in-law's family snuck over to the house my father had left me. They planned to break the lock and move in, thinking that since I was just a woman, I wouldn't be able to do anything to stop them. But they didn't expect. The new homeowner had already placed several ferocious guard dogs in the courtyard. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law barely had time to react before the dogs lunged at them. Their screams echoed through the night as they were chased down and bitten. In the end, they were literally thrown out of the property. When I heard the news, I felt utterly satisfied. In my past life, They had taken everything from me, treating me like an easy target simply because I was a woman. They stole my house, seized my land, and even beat me so badly I ended up in the hospital. This time, it was only fair that they got a taste of what it felt like to be treated like thieves. The next morning, I woke up early. It was time to return to work at the broadcast station, because I had spent the last few days helping the village during the flood relief efforts. I had been away for a while. When my colleagues saw me, they immediately expressed their condolences. The station supervisor approached me with a kind smile. "You're still young, Laura. Don't get stuck in the past, okay? Life moves forward." I felt truly touched. Just as I was about to respond, a familiar voice echoed from outside. "I'm Lara's mother-in-law. Luis is dead, and Laura told me she doesn't want to work anymore. I'm here to collect her job stipend." The entire office fell silent. My colleagues exchanged confused glances. "You're Lara's mother-in-law?" My mother-in-law let out a fake sigh, pretending to be heartbroken. "Yes. Didn't Laura tell you? My son drowned in the flood a few days ago. She said she doesn't want to work anymore and asked me to come collect her stipend." Then, as if she hadn't said something utterly outrageous, she continued shamelessly. "By the way, is the station hiring? My nephew is a middle school graduate. He's got excellent grades and would be perfect for the job." And then, to everyone's disgust, she dragged Elise into the broadcast station. My coworkers exchanged looks. One of them finally spoke up. "But Laura came in this morning. She already reported for work." The moment those words were spoken, both my mother-in-law and Elise visibly froze. Their expressions twisted in shock. My mother-in-law snapped. "Impossible. That little whore is still at home mourning my son. There's no way she's here." I stepped forward, meeting her gaze with a smirk. "Well, isn't that a shame for you?" I pushed open the inner office door and stared directly at the two of them. "Teacher, can I have a private word with her?" The supervisor nodded in agreement. Without hesitation, I led my mother-in-law into the broadcast room. As soon as the door shut behind us, I cut straight to the point. "Failing to steal my inheritance wasn't enough for you, now you're here trying to scam my job? Do you have no shame?" Her pretend grief vanished in an instant. With a twisted, furious expression, she snarled at me. "So what if I am? If you hadn't been a barren, cursed woman, my son would never have needed to fake his death to escape from you. He had everything planned. He stole the village's road repair funds. He was ready to leave you and run away with Elise. But you're the one who burned him alive." I let out a mocking laugh. "And why didn't he just divorce me? If he had wanted to leave, all he had to do was say so. I would have let him go without a second thought." She clenched her fists, her voice dripping with malice. "Because if he divorced you, how was he going to get you to pay his debts? Did you really think my son married you out of love? He only wanted you because you were an orphan, because you had no one to rely on. He was after the house your father left you. But you ungrateful bitch, clung onto that house and wouldn't let us have a single piece of it. That's why we had to fake his death. Once he was gone, you were supposed to be easy to manipulate." At her words, I finally smiled. Slowly, I reached out and pressed the record button on the broadcasting system. Did everyone hear that? Faking a death to embezzle public funds, attempting to steal my inheritance, forging a death certificate, these are all serious crimes. Someone, call the authorities. The moment the door burst open, my colleagues rushed in and grabbed her. They dragged her straight to the village office. I had done it on purpose. I wanted her to reveal the truth. I wanted her to expose her own crimes. And now, her confession had already been broadcasted to the entire village. Everyone knew the filthy secrets of their family. And now, they were all getting arrested. This was no longer just fraud, it was a conspiracy, embezzlement, and attempted murder. Not one of them was getting away. Chapter 9. After everything was settled, I returned to the broadcast station. There, I made an important request to my teacher. "Teacher, I want to apply for the college entrance exam. I want to leave this village. I want to live well, for my father's sake." 2. In my past life, I had missed the registration deadline for the entrance exam. It had been my greatest regret. But this time, I would not let fate decide for me. When my name was added to the exam registration list, I knew my new life had officially begun. Before leaving the village, I made one last stop, the police station. The moment my brother-in-law saw me, his face lit up as if he had just found his savior. He begged desperately, "Sister-in-law, we don't blame you anymore for what happened to Luis. Please, help us get out of here. Your niece needs her father. She's still so young. If I go to jail, what will happen to her?" I watched him quietly, for a long time. Then, I finally spoke. Rather than growing up with lawless parents, I'd rather she grow up knowing the importance of justice. That way, when she's older, she can avoid becoming someone like you. As I turned to leave, his curses followed me, calling me ungrateful, a heartless traitor, but I ignored him. As for my mother-in-law, she never made it to prison. I heard that she went mad and was sent to a psychiatric hospital. When news of this spread, the entire village celebrated on my behalf. The villagers who recovered their stolen road funds thanked me, and the children I had saved during the flood rescue crafted a banner for me, submitting my name to the village committee. For the first time in my life, I received an award for being a good person. 6 months later, I passed the entrance exam and was admitted to a prestigious university. That September, as I walked through the campus avenue lined with phoenix trees, I saw so many new faces, so many new opportunities. Everything was completely different from my past life. For the first time, I wasn't alone. As I strolled toward class, the sound of a familiar song played over the campus radio. Back to the beginning, where the memories stay. That youthful face. We've finally made it to this day. Old yellowed photos hidden inside our desks. Before I knew it, I found myself humming along. Suddenly, someone clapped me on the shoulder. "Laura, what are you daydreaming for? Let's go. Class is starting." A bright smile spread across my face. Coming! At this age, there's something magical about sitting at a desk, resting your chin on your hand, dreaming about endless possibilities. Years later, I became a researcher. One day, I returned to my hometown and visited my teacher. The moment they saw me, their eyes filled with tears. Grasping my hands tightly, they whispered, "Thank goodness. Thank goodness you made it out." Yes. Thank goodness I didn't get trapped in this place in this life.